rest of the day. So we got a full day, and I'll get started. 2 years ago, we had 15 presentations. I've been accused of trying to pack too much into a limited amount of time. Let's do that again. We had 100 participants here in this room. It seemed to be a wonderful place to come back to, and that's why we're here today. I'm sorry about the drive. We had presentations on the history of springs protection, the aesthetics of springs, the springs that occur in state parks, and many of our largest springs are in state and local parks, the ecosystem services provided by springs, water supply planning issues related to springs, the cost of alternative water supplies. If you don't use the groundwater, how much do you have to pay for water? The water quality trends in springs, the groundwater budget in springs, the biology and impairment of springs, the various water management district programs going on in springs, total maximum daily loads and basin management action plans as related to springs, and the use of MFL, or minimum flows and levels, and applying those for grassroots protection efforts. So we covered all that 2 years ago. So, and those presentations are on our website if it's back up. Somebody actually took our website down yesterday. Do you believe that? I don't know if I have any enemies anywhere, but our website went down yesterday. And so I'm sorry for the inconvenience it caused me, but it came back up last night. And those PowerPoint presentations are there. And of course, if you go to the working group website, you'll find many, many more PowerPoint presentations about the issues, the facts, and springs. So let me just summarize very briefly what we've learned. I think most of you know that we have a nitrate issue in springs, and right now TMDLs have been issued or are in the process of being issued for Fanning Springs, Wekiva Springs, Santa Fe, River Springs. Those are the springs above Highway 47. Wakulla Springs, Silver Springs, Rainbow Springs, and others. Those total maximum daily loads for nitrate indicate that we're going to have to reduce nitrate levels anywhere from about 40 to 90%. 40 to 90% less nitrogen is going to have to go on the land if we're going to fix those springs. I think we can all agree to that. And I think that's a basic tenet of what we're going to be talking about today is how do we get there? Second thing, Santa Fe BMAP, the Basin Management Action Plan, is the first one to be developed, I believe. The other ones are still incomplete. And it requires at least a 35% reduction in nitrate for the springs along the Santa Fe River, some of which are almost 25 to 30 times higher than the background concentration. The problem with that, in the presentation we heard 2 years ago from DEP, was that it may take 15 to 20 years to fully implement that BMAP because a lot of those inputs of nitrogen are agricultural inputs. They're considered non-point source inputs. They're not controlled under the normal MPDS type permitting for nitrogen from wastewater plants. And so it takes a lot of volunteer effort and best management practices to do those things. So 15 to 20 years, I just about died when I heard that. The biggest springs restoration project currently underway, I think we can say, is the Tallahassee Wakulla Springs project. Tallahassee is upgrading their wastewater treatment process, the AWT, Advanced Wastewater Treatment for nitrogen removal. They're taking their nitrogen down to 3 milligrams per liter from about 7 or 8 milligrams per liter. That's going to cut the nitrate coming out of the Wakulla Springs in half, roughly, that one project. But it's costing over $200 million. So obviously prevention is always cheaper than fixing a problem after it's a problem. But this will be prevention for the future that's going to make a big difference. And we need to really be following the experience of Wakulla Springs in terms of the benefits of spending that much public money to restore a spring. Minimum flows and levels have been established for a number of springs. In the last 2 years, the two that I can think of are Chassahowitzka and Homosassa. Those still aren't completely through the regulatory and possible challenge process. They both allow an additional decline of 3% flow for those two spring systems. Very popular, they're coastal spring systems. They both have very strong indicators of salination. Those springs are becoming more salty all the time, as are the other springs on the Springs Coast. And that is due to a lot of causes. But anyway, we do have some MFLs. MFLs have been delayed, or minimum flows and levels, on Silver, Itchitucknee, Santa Fe, Wakulla, Kings Bay. And those are all in process, and Rainbow too. They're all in process, but they're not done yet. And we're going through drafts and some. The other thing that I think we're going to agree on is there is a growing awareness with the citizenry. We have more and more advocacy groups for specific spring systems. We have, for a long time, we had the Wekiwa, the Friends of the Wekiwa River, and those springs down there that have made great progress. We now have a springs group at the Sissa River who kept out a bottling proposal in their river system, their spring system. The Wakulla Springs Alliance, the Homosassa Springs Alliance, the Silver Springs Alliance, the Volusia Blue Springs Alliance. Actually, there's a North Florida Springs Alliance, and there's additional alliances germinating in Ichitucky and Kings Bay. So the public is getting organized, and the regulatory people want to do the right thing, and I think we just maybe, the public, having a concerned public will make that easier to do the right job in terms of fixing those things. And so the springs facts that we can't agree on are that spring flows are declining. The average flow in Silver is half of what the last 2 years, the average flow in Silver Springs is half of the long-term average flow. And that's just what the data says. That's not what I say, that's what the data says. Now, I'll get back to the things we don't agree on in a minute. Rainbow and Ichitucky Springs flows are reduced by 15% in the most recent decade compared to the period of record. Wekiwa Springs flows are steadily declining for the last 40 years and are below the established minimum flow level for 7 of the last 12 years. They've been below the minimum flow level. Fanning Springs has been downgraded from a first magnitude to a second magnitude spring. Pleasanton Spring, of course, White Sulphur Springs, Hornsby, and others have stopped flowing pretty much completely. And a number of springs are reversing. I think that's the facts. We can agree on those things. The spring nitrate concentrations are elevated. They're above the numeric nutrient standard. It's actually not a final standard yet. We'll hear more about that today, but it's been implemented through several total maximum daily loads now, which means it has force of law. Roughly 70% of our springs, we have about 1,000 of these artesian springs based on the latest inventory by DEP. About 70% of the springs are above that numeric nutrient standard for springs. And about 20% of the springs are above 1 milligram per liter, which is 25 times or 2,500% higher than the background level for springs. So those are things that I think we agree on. Springs water clarity is declining, especially in Wakulla Springs, in Ichitucky, Rainbow, Silver, Kings Bay. Those are systems that we've been working on, and the water clarity is either gone or very impaired in those springs. And these springs many of them are impaired by algal overgrowth, filamentous algae, and algae that's not normally prevalent in springs is dominating, and there are declining populations of snails, fish, and birds in these springs. So those are things we agree on. The things that we need to resolve that we don't have agreement on are how much of the spring flow reduction is actually due to rainfall declines versus pumping, groundwater extraction. That's a very legitimate question. It takes some pretty detailed work to get to answers on that. We'll never have perfect answers on that, but it's a very important thing to work out so we know how much of the effect we can actually control and how much we can't really control. Another question that's unresolved: what's the best method for estimating and enforcing a minimum flow and level for springs? There is an effort to bring minimum flows and levels into a common format, but they're all over the place right now in terms of what they require and how the science is done. So what's the best way to implement MFLs? Another question that needs to be resolved: how long will it take to implement these TMDLs? I mean, the TMDL says you will do this. This is a requirement of law that we will get down to these lower nitrate levels, but how long should it take? And then the one question that's come up recently on Chassahowitzka is, how are springs MFLs independent of water quality and anti-degradation considerations? We're fortunate to have the US EPA representative here today who can talk about that open issue still. So our strategy for today is we've got 14 panelists. Boyd, you can come up here whenever you want. I'm sorry you're trying to hide that there. I think these are final panelists. So I think everybody came, and thank you very much for coming. Each panelist should briefly introduce themselves. When it's your turn, I'll call on you. Panelists have been asked to address 4 questions. are on the screen here, and they've all seen these questions. We can write them up on the board if you need them. Sorry to make you turn around, but those are the questions I would really, as a minimum on each panel presentation, I'd like to just take a shot at answering those 4 questions. They are, what, in your opinion, what are the problems confronting springs? What do you think needs to be done to address those problems? Given current rules and resources, how long do you think it might take to accomplish those solutions? And can or should this schedule be accelerated and how? That's what this session's about today, is really solutions. Each panelist is asked, I've asked them to keep their comments to 10 minutes. They've got a total of 15 minutes, so that's 10 minutes for their comments and 5 minutes for questions from the audience. The questions for each panelist will be directly to them, and I'll try to field those, and we've got a mobile mic so the audience, be sure you stand up and make yourself loud and clear when you ask a question. So it's not very much time for each panelist, and I apologize for that. There's not many PowerPoint presentations other than these slides, and that's it. That's the last one. So everybody's speaking from the heart today. I've asked them to speak as frankly as they can. And there's no final agency action taking place here. So we really, as scientists and engineers and experts on these issues, we need to be speaking to each other, and I hope we'll do that. We have 2 coffee breaks scheduled, one at 10:30, one at 2:30, and we're going to do our very best to stay on the schedule. We've got a 1-minute warning for the panelists when they get 9 minutes into their presentation that Natalie in the front row has, and then when you get to the end of the 15 minutes, there'll be just a hook. And I'm sorry about that in advance. Our afternoon session, at the end of this, after our afternoon break, we have what I consider a real treat. This is our visitor from, Lars isn't up here yet. Yeah, one more hiding back there. We have a facilitator, professional facilitator here from Denver who worked on the Edwards-Aquifer issues and is willing to help us today start figuring out how we might go forward from here. And we know we're not going to solve the problems here today, but how can we go forward? How can that best be accomplished with the minimum number of lawsuits, minimum number of hard feelings, and the maximum success? So that's what